For some reason, inflicting pain on Sackboy has become a recurring theme on this channel, and I can't say that I don't enjoy it, so let's take it a step further and see just how quickly we can kill him in every single level. For obvious reasons, we aren't going to count using hold to retry or despawning, we're only interested in the level itself killing us, which, unsurprisingly, is a bit of a challenge for the first level, Introduction. There aren't any hazards in this level at all. Well, there is electricity here, but we can't really touch it, meaning we have to find a way to squish Sackboy instead. It's pretty easy to do that by getting underneath this rainbow, but this is quite far into the level, and there's actually an earlier spot that we can use. After walking up the first hill, we can find Pete and Leo, where doing a trip jump lets us get in between them. Then by getting into the right spot, Sackboy gets crushed. Now, to time this accurately, for every level we'll be starting the timer on the frame that the entrance's doors are fully opened, and stopping the timer on the first frame of the death animation. So by doing this optimally, by getting the trip jump first try and getting squished on the first possible pleo cycle, the fastest we can die in Introduction is in 17.367 seconds. First steps is already made easier since the first type of hazard, gas, can be found partway in, but again this is pretty far into the level. So instead, we can use the sticker switch at the top of the first ramp and then stand directly beneath the race gate as it comes downwards. To do this as fast as possible, we can dialogue jump past the king to conserve our speed, then edge jump up the ramp, and then place the sticker as fast as possible once Sackboy is in front of it, getting a time of 14.333 seconds for first steps. Get a grips gas is also pretty far into the level, but there isn't really much to squish us at the beginning, or so it seems. The start of this level has been made in such a way that despawning from the entrance at the right time causes the floor to lose its collision, where if we then bring it back while Sackboy is inside of it, he gets killed. The fastest way to do this is to switch to a higher controller number to spawn another player and restart the level. Here, we can pause the game and wait for the despawn before our timer actually starts, where we then unpause and bring back the collision, completing this level in only 4.733 seconds. Skate to Victory is definitely the simplest level so far, since there isn't really anything hiding at the start to hurt us, making the gas that's next to the windmill the best option. But there's still a couple of things we can do to save some time. We do a dialogue jump to get past the king like in first steps, and then we can get momentum with the bird before letting go, to then finally grab the edge of the platform to swing us into the gas a little bit faster, finishing Skate to Victory in 9.233 seconds. Swinging Safari is pretty cool. You'd think we'd have to wait to get out of the submarine to do something, possibly with the statue or the monkey. But it just so happens that if you hit the wall of the submarine in the right way as it's crashing, you're able to clip inside of it and die, with a time of 7.067 seconds. Now, Burning Forest probably has the closest hazards to the entrance than any other level, with being able to touch the fire simply by dropping down. And while fire normally takes 2 hits to kill you, if you're able to touch it quickly enough after spawning, it actually only takes 1 hit. There's even a trick you can do at the beginning to disable the dialogue box, by pausing while the level is loading. But this doesn't actually do much. Even without it, you're able to close the dialogue in time to chain the little falling speed into the dropdown, completing this one in only 767 milliseconds. The Meerkat Kingdom is interesting because we can remove the collision like we did in Get a Grip to die that way, which seems pretty fast, but there's also the gas to the right of the entrance that we could use. After timing it though, it becomes pretty clear that using the gas is much faster, since it just takes so long to bring back the collision for the level. We can also make it slightly faster by chaining our falling speed into the dropdown like in Burning Forest, making this level take exactly 3 seconds to die in. The Wedding Reception is another level where it seems like there are 2 pretty good options, which sadly don't involve the candles since these ones can't actually hurt you. The first is to simply walk up to the big skeleton and fall just before its mouth into the spikes. The second is a bit more involved, where doing a precise set of movements allows you to be eaten by the butler. Thankfully in this case, the easier strategy is the faster one, where even though the butler is closer to the entrance than the spikes, it just takes too much time to get up there compared to falling down, finishing this one in 5.5 seconds. In the darkness there are spikes relatively close to the entrance, but we also have the dog that we can use, which is useful because it actually moves around. While it's not heavy enough to squish us after getting underneath it, it does actually have enough strength to push us into a wall to kill us that way. Meaning the fastest way to do this level is to walk down to the dog as normal, make it move forward just enough to get behind it, then jump at the right time to get squished by its brain, killing us in 6.3 seconds. Even though the butler wasn't very useful to us before, it's definitely his time to shine a Skulldozer, since he's pretty much the only thing near the beginning that can harm us at all. It is a bit of a challenge being able to jump high enough to reach, but it is possible, where once we spawn and then do a slope jump off the closed level post, we can climb up and get eaten with a time of 5.8 seconds. Boomtown is amusing because our best option is again based around removing collision, but not in the same way as before. We are able to bring it back afterwards to get squished, but it's immensely faster just to fall through the floor and land in the pit of gas that happens to be directly beneath us, completing this level in 1.933 seconds. Another pretty fast one. The Mines is another level that has a moving object right at the start, and this one's even made of metal, so it definitely has potential. The only problem is that it loses all of its speed quite quickly, almost before we even have control. But what little we can do is actually enough, since getting a jump off the side in the right way allows us to land in front of it while it still has speed, getting crushed against Uncle Jalapeno in only 1.8 seconds, just faster than Boomtown. And Uncle Jalapeno isn't done yet, because in Serpentshrine, he's just about the only interesting object at the beginning, while the nearest hazards are all the way up the stairs. The only thing is, he's just really not that heavy. But Sackboy is. With the help from Metraberryy, we can use another sack person to weigh down Uncle Jalapeno, where it's then enough to kill the one underneath in a time of 5.367 seconds. Lowrider is a bit of a puzzle to figure out. The closest hazard is pretty far from the start, so it's mostly up to finding a way for the car to kill us. Which is actually a bit hard to do with only a single person, since it seems like the best option was to use another player to drive it, while another gets run over. That was until finding that getting inside of the boot of the car, and then grabbing in the right position, is actually enough to squish you in a time of 4.633 seconds. The beginning of Subway has a ton of potential with how many boxes are able to be stacked and moved around, but it's actually pretty difficult to move them how you want to, and they're only made of cardboard, so even if you get a second player, it still isn't enough to weigh it down. But that's when it was found that it's much easier to instead use 3 players to simply push one of the smaller boxes into the wall that the other player is next to, killing them in 2.167 seconds. Without the boxes, the best strategy is to walk into the elevator and then touch the gas that fills the previous area with a time of 7.2 seconds. The construction site is pretty funny, since even though there's fire and gas just past the race gate, which we can easily jump over, it turns out that if you just get lucky enough, or I guess unlucky enough, jumping past mags in the perfect way is able to kill you in a time of only 2.867 seconds. The same thing can't really be done on Subway just because her arm is positioned slightly different. The start of Endurance Dojo has a few interesting things going for it. It does thankfully have some gas right near the beginning that we can use if nothing else, but funnily, there's also the giant ninja star that's above the costume prizes that does actually kill you if you manage to touch it. But it is kind of hard to get up there. As amusing as that would be, the fastest strategy is to again use 2 players, but position them both in between the bottom of the staircase, where then grabbing the other player through the bottom is somehow able to kill you, dying with a time of 4.267 seconds. Sensei's Lost Castle is a surprisingly simple level for this challenge, as this is the first time that the sensei is located right next to the entrance, and unsurprisingly, she is by far the easiest story character to accidentally get killed by. So since there's nothing else near the beginning of the level, literally all we need to do is jump into her cloud at the right time, finishing in 3.467 seconds. I tried using 2 players to reach it earlier, but because of the dialogue box it doesn't really help. The Terrible Oni's volcano has this gap in the floor that we can sort of get ourselves into, but not enough to die. Like before though, the sensei is just hanging out right at the beginning of the level, so we'll probably just use that again. It is a bit different this time though, since she's actually just barely too high to reach using a regular jump. We can use a trip jump to get up there, but the sensei's dialogue box makes it kind of awkward and slow to set up. That is until you realize that, after moving to the back you can combine the dialogue jump with the setup to then barely close the text in time to do the trip jump, dying with a time of 5.533 seconds. The solution to the Dancer's Chord is something that you might already be familiar with since I've shown it off in the past, where since the nearest hazard is extremely far away, and it would just take a bit too long to try and get crushed by the airship, we can use the fact that if you just jump off the edge at the right time, you'll have a chance of just instantly dying when you land, getting a time of 3.5 seconds. With how simple the setup is for this, it's unsurprising that some people have done it completely by accident. Elephant Temple has fire right at the beginning of it, but obviously we aren't going to be using it, since, unsurprisingly, it's actually super easy to die by getting underneath the shopkeeper. The challenge is just trying to find the fastest way to do it, considering that there's a dialogue box here. The obvious answer is just to close out of it, move to the back, and then get squished. but due to the fact that you can still grab objects during cutscenes, we can actually optimize this slightly by grabbing his arm during the dialogue to move straight to the back. But also, because of the way the arm is angled, you can actually swing into the gap from it to then die, allowing us to do the whole thing without even touching the floor, finishing with a time of 2.1 seconds. The Great Magician's Palace is a lot more straightforward though. There isn't really much to get squished on near the start, but thankfully there is some fire not too far away, where even though we'll just be jumping into it, we can die a bit faster if a block falls onto us at the same time. So after starting the level and doing a dialogue jump, we can just fall into the fire where the block cycle lines up perfectly to kill us, getting a time of 4.333 seconds. You wouldn't think it, but the Frozen Tundra follows pretty much the exact same story as Get a Grip, where there is some gas that we can die on, but it's pretty far away from the entrance. And since there isn't anything to get squished on, our best option is going to be removing collision to then bring it back. Doing this in this level does require us to move to the back layer while doing it, but it still lets us die in only 5.267 seconds. It's funny that the only levels that this is possible on just so happens to be the ones where there's nothing else to kill us, since removing collision doesn't always work. Well, in the bunker it actually does work, and we can get a pretty good time after jumping onto the window that falls down. But with the electricity that we can find to the right, it's actually just barely slower doing it that way. Where if we also do an edge jump and aim for the highest part that will kill us, we can finish in a time of 4.467 seconds. I did try using the soldier to crush us, but he's just too light. The beginning of the collector's lair actually contains a type of hazard that we haven't used yet, which is explosives. You could get a pretty good time by activating the sticker switch properly, but it's nowhere near as fast as just using the electricity at the drop down. And we can still even go faster by getting a second player to do a cooperative jump to reach the electricity in the roof, finishing this one in only 2.067 seconds. And now, the final story level, the Collector, which coincidentally is probably going to be the longest level to die in, and only for one reason, the carriage. This thing is notorious for being impossible to escape, no matter what kind of tricks we throw at it. Even in create mode you get stuck inside of it. And since there's nothing that can kill us in here, we have no choice but to wait out the ride before doing anything, which is an automatic 11.5 seconds. Once we're out, there's some fire that we can't even touch, and the rest of the hazards are pretty far away too. Thankfully though, there's actually a tiny gap above the carriage that we can slip into and die. The gap is pretty high up though, so we have to use a right corner jump, to then die with a time of exactly 14 seconds, which means it only took 2.5 seconds once we could finally move. It's actually also possible to get out of bounds by doing this too. Now, the funny thing with the minigames is that most of them actually use the exact same strategy to die as quickly as possible, which is so easy to do you've probably done it by accident. Apart from the survival games, Little Zim and his race car appear in every single one, and every single time he's there, it's extremely easy to get underneath his race car and get squished. The only times that you can't do this is when he's in the thin layer, which only occurs in 8 out of his 21 minigames. So, here are all of the times for the levels where that's possible. Castle Climb Challenge, 4.433 seconds. Skateboard Freefall, 1.4 seconds. Flaming Seesaws Easy, 1.567 seconds. Flaming Seesaws Medium, 1.2 seconds. Flaming Seesaws Hard, 1.467 seconds. Bubble Labyrinth, 1.867 seconds. Wrestler's Drag, 1.467 seconds. The Drag Race, 1.233 seconds. Darimasan, 1.9 seconds. Roller Castle, 1.7 seconds. The Shifting Temple, 1.167 seconds. Fire Pits, 1.1 seconds. And Rotor Tubes, 1.467 seconds. As for the rest of the minigames, in tie skipping we can fall into the gas as normal to get a time of 3.967 seconds. You can't get squished by Big Zam. In Tunnel Plunge we just have to run over to the nearest hazard, which are the spikes past the race gate, which we can also skip by doing a bounce jump, finishing in 4.167 seconds. Meerkat Bounce is probably the most amusing survival game at the very least, where instead of just bolting into the fire, you can actually slide in between two of the meerkats to get squished in only 2.833 seconds. There's a small time save we can do in the Dangerous Descent too, where after pressing the button, you can reach the gas a tiny bit faster if you instead run to the right, dying in 2.4 seconds. Wobble Poles requires you to simply walk over to the nearest hazard after doing a race gate skip, hitting the spikes in 7.767 seconds. In Cowabunga, we simply drop down into the gas as soon as we can, finishing in just 0.8 seconds. In all three roller run levels, the strategy is similar to Tunnel Plunge, where we just have to run over to the nearest hazard while also doing a race gate skip to save some time, although it's a lot harder to jump over these ones because of the angle that they're on. Finishing roller run easy in 5.767 seconds, medium in 5.3 seconds, and hard in 6 seconds. Okay, Puzzle Wheel is definitely the most interesting minigame because there's practically nothing that can even kill us in the level, like, at all. We can't get squished on the doors or any rocks or anything. The only thing we can really do is remove the collision on the entrance, which still doesn't do much because it only affects the outer material, which, unsurprisingly, is too thin to kill us when we bring back the collision. It's only when you stand in a specific spot while removing the collision where you're able to get squished from the entrance rolling onto you, which means that we have to do the trick after the timer has started, unlike every other time, giving us a record of 7.367 seconds for Puzzle Wheel. Actually, elevation is also pretty interesting, since we don't really want to wait on the elevator for the gas to appear because of how far down it is. It takes more than 30 seconds. This makes the alternative, using a second player to do the race gate skip with, who's then used to get out of bounds, where we can then fall down the length of the elevator, where our terminal velocity is enough to clip us into the metal, killing Sackboy in 18.333 seconds. The discombobulator just has us running to the right into the gas as fast as we can, which ends up being 2.567 seconds. The Wheel of Misfortune is kind of similar, where we just have to reach the gas as soon as possible once the minigame starts, doing this one in 4.667 seconds. And same with pillar jumping. Push the button, fall into the gas, finish in 3.4 seconds. For Spline Rider though, instead of doing a race gate skip and touching the electricity, this one lets us remove the collision near the entrance, allowing us to fall into the gas instead, getting a time of 1.333 seconds. And finally, for Jetpack Tunnel, like most survival games, we fall down the hole and die, with our final time being 6.233 seconds, which is actually slower than how long it takes to reach the scoreboard. Now, let's have a look at our results. The three fastest story levels were Burning Forest, then more than a second behind, the Mines, and then Boomtown. The slowest level by far was Introduction, being more than 3 seconds behind second last, which was First Steps. The top three minigames were Cowabunga, Fire Pits, then the Shifting Temple. You can really see how much Little Zim helped overall, as there were only 2 levels that were able to beat most of the times that used him. The slowest minigame was Elevation, not even close to the next fastest time, which is more than 10 seconds ahead. Overall, we can see that most levels were able to be beaten in less than 5 seconds, with only a few of them being beyond 10. So, just for fun, here's every single level being played side by side, from fastest to slowest. Try and see if you can beat some of my times. I'd love to see even more optimizations, where there might even be some completely unexplored strategies still hiding. Regardless, I hope that you've enjoyed the speedrun-oriented challenge, and thanks for watching.